Hey guys, welcome to Armchair-explorer. My name's Aaron Miller. I'm a travel writer and your host, and today we have the first of what I'm calling our Discover Guides. This is when we do like a deep dive into a destination, chatting with locals and guides and experts to get the lowdown on the place they live in and love. It's a little bit like a traditional radio show in some ways, or like an audio travel mag. We're going to have multiple guests in different segments. We're going to have interviews, immersive documentary pieces, bucket list clips, and more. But through it all, of course, will be adventure, nature, inspiration, all that good stuff, all those things that make exploring the world the sweetest thing in life. So today, our deep dive is the city of Victoria in British Columbia. It's located on the southern tip of Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. And if you're not familiar with Vancouver Island, first off, it's absolutely massive. It's about 12,000 square miles, and all of that is absolutely beautiful. Ancient, old-growth forests, rugged coastlines, wild beaches, and it's also just a really chilled and relaxed way of life there. The people are super cool. Victoria, where we're going today, is the largest city on Vancouver Island and the capital of British Columbia. And it is the perfect base for exploring that southern half of the island. So I got to speak with a bunch of different people to pull this episode together. And my feeling about it after that is that this is somewhere that is absolutely surrounded in nature, wrapped in nature. It is a big, awe-inspiring place. There's tons of wildlife. It's the kind of place that you just go to disconnect and reconnect with the natural world, actually. But it's also just a cool city too. There's lots of stuff going on. There's festivals, there's great bars and restaurants. But as I said, it's really laid back as well. It's like an artistic community. It's eclectic. It's a little left of center. But what I really, really, really love about it is this slogan that they have, the way they refer to themselves. They call Victoria the place where land meets sea and cultures converge, where land meets sea. I love that. Not just because it sounds cool and poetic, but also because those in-between places where two giant ecosystems come crashing together, the mountains tumbling into the ocean, there's a unique feeling in those places, a unique kind of energy that you can't find anywhere else. So for a taste of that feeling, here is our Discover Guide to Victoria, British Columbia. I hope you enjoy it. And if you do and are curious to find out more, listen at the end for all those details, and we'll put everything up in the show notes too. But we're going to start with a bike tour through the city. And I always think bike tours are such a lovely way to explore a new city. They're faster than a walking tour. You can get more done, but you're outside, you're in the breeze, you're soaking it up in a way that you can't do when you're just stuck in a car. So this bike tour is called the Castles, Hoods and Legends Tour. And our guide is Victoria local and all-around bicycle legend, Alan Bruce. He's the lead guide for a company called The Peddler. And he's going to share a few of his favorite tales with us as we explore the city. There's going to be murders, mistresses, the narrowest street in North America, and the tallest totem pole in the world. Are you ready to start pedaling? Yeah, me too. Let's go. Our first stop is the enormous and very stately and intricately carved Parliament building. It's 500 feet wide, it's got 6 massive columns out front, and a couple of interesting quirks.
Francis Rattenbury, who created this building, he really wanted it to feel like the old European style buildings. That was his inspiration for this building. So at the time, it was a really popular trend was these domes at the top of the buildings. So the Victoria Legislature has 33 domes at the top of them, and they're all made of copper. As we all know, as copper oxidizes, it turns green.
But Francis, who is, by the way, the star of this little anecdote, didn't want to wait the decades it would take to get that old, weathered European look.
One of the local legends in town is that one day Francis Rattenbury was walking to work and a stable boy made fun of his shoes or his clothes or something like that. And he was so petty about this that he hired that stable boy to collect buckets of horse urine and climb up to the top of the building with a sponge and apply it to every single dome so that copper oxidized faster. And so you could think about how many days that must have taken to cover.
An evil genius.
Yeah, to cover 33 of those giant domes would be rough. But another really interesting and part of this building is at the very top of it, there's a golden statue of Captain James Vancouver, who, quote, discovered Vancouver Island. But what's really interesting to know about that statue, though, is that it actually cast with 2 left feet, because it was cheaper to cast the same foot twice than it was to cast a left foot and a right foot. But I mean, who's going to know?
From the legislature, we pedal downtown through the buzzing arts district of Fernwood, buskers on the street and lampposts painted in bright murals of color, until eventually we arrive in Chinatown, the second oldest Chinatown in North America, in fact, after San Francisco. And when it was founded during the gold rush, the miners loved it because it was famous for 3 things: gambling, opium, and brothels.
At the time, though, only gambling was illegal. And so...
How the tables have turned, right?
Yes. And so what's really interesting about, or what's one of my favorite parts about coming to this Chinatown, why I like to stop here so much, is that we have what's called Fantan Alley. And it's the narrowest street in Canada. It's so narrow, in fact, that you'll see that the addresses down this street will say like 23 and a half, because it's such a narrow street. It's about 4.5 feet wide at its narrowest margin. It was based off of a Chinese gambling game that was very popular in this street. And so what was very common was to have a boy on one side of the street and a boy on the other side of the street kind of keeping an eye out. And if they saw a policeman or something coming, they'd run down the street knocking on all the windows. And everybody who was gambling would take their opium sets and put it on top of the gambling tables to hide their gambling addictions with their opium addiction.
And if you have food addictions, this is still a great spot to this day. We'll probably grab a snack before we leave, because we've got some pedaling to do. From here, we head up to Government House, Craigdark Castle, Ross Bay Cemetery, where the Canadian painter Emily Carr is buried. And then, near the end of our ride, we turn towards the ocean.
And then we'll take our bikes and we'll cross to Clover Point and go along what's called the Coastal Bluff ecosystem, which is a beautiful, beautiful ride along the coast. It's high up above the ocean. The Olympic mountain range is just across the water. And then we'll make our way to Beacon Hill Park. So Beacon Hill Park is sort of the jewel of the downtown crown, as I like to say. It's where our biggest sort of Victorian era park is. We like to stop here in front of the world's tallest totem pole.
It's about the height of a 10-story building, a skyscraper of a totem pole, covered head to toe in colorful depictions of eagles and killer whales, ravens and bears.
And it's made out of one single tree, and that was cut here on the island. And this totem pole has a little bit of a different story to it, because this totem pole was carved by Mungo Martin, a very famous carver here on the island. And he dedicated this totem pole to the Indigenous fighters of World War I and World War II. Because not a lot of people know this, but about 5,000 Indigenous peoples from North America fought and possibly died in World War II. These are people that left their home, their land, their company and culture, and they went and fought for what they believed was defending their way of life. Of course, like many minority groups that went and fought, when they returned back from the war, they weren't really given the fanfare that their, colonial compatriots had gotten. They were sort of quietly put back on the reserve and not very well taken care of or looked after for their service. So Mungo Martin created this totem pole as a way to honor all the cultures of the West Coast in this totem pole. You can imagine that they would have different totem poles at different hunting and gathering spots, and everybody would leave for the day and go hunt and gather, and at the end of the day they'd all come together under this totem pole and light a fire in the dark, and this totem pole's face would light up with all the different characters, and the storyteller would tell a section of that story, being the eagle that night, where the main character meets the thunderbird or the killer whale or something. And the amazing stories and a connection to the culture and the land, something I find so mystical and fantastic.
The Castle Hoods and Legends tour is a good way to get an introduction to the city, but there's also food tours, coastal tours, anything you can think of, private tours, and my favorite, Hoppy Hour tours. Victoria has an awesome craft beer scene, and Alan says it is the unofficial cycling capital of Canada. Where the land meets the sea and cultures converge. We'll hear more about the sea and land soon, but this is where those cultures converge, from the First Nations people who have lived here since time immemorial to a crazy architect who, with a little bit of help from horse urine, gave Victoria its old world feel.
The thing I like to say about Victoria is that it's somewhere in the cusp of a big town and a small city. Somewhere in that little gray zone there. It's got this vibe to it that it wants to be bigger than it is, but because there's so much happening in this city all the time. But because we're on the base of an island, there's not much room for expansion and growth. So everything stays very tight and close. So you get this feeling of a town of, people, but it has a city nightlife sort of thing. I've been traveling quite a bit. I've lived in some different countries and stuff, and I don't know, there's something about this city just keeps drawing me back. It's just such a beautiful soul in this city. I really love it. And I really love people who make the time to come out here, because it's not the most famous of places, but you really will have a good time. You're never bored in this city, especially in the summertime. There's always a party going on somewhere that you can join.
That's great.
I love it. Yeah, it's great.
I can tell you're an amazing guide, like to your genuine passion and interest, and I always think with, when you find a local person who can really share that in an articulate and fun way, that's just gold dust, and such a pleasure to be able to see a city like that. Thank you so much, Alan. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, mate. And
super thrilled to have finally done this. I was very excited for this, so I'm glad we got it to work.
Okay, we've set the scene. That's how we're going to start our trip. That's day one, because we're probably going to go out for some happy hour beers with Alan afterwards. But what are we going to do with the rest of our time? Well, one thing we're definitely not going to miss is heading out on a boat in search of some whales, humpbacks, orcas, you name it. Victoria is one of the best places in North America. They feed here year-round, which is quite rare, so you're almost guaranteed to see them. And that truly is one of those bucket list experiences. It's hard to describe the first time you see them surface in front of you and you see the enormity of them. On one hand, it's kind of like seeing a real-life sea monster, but then immediately you have this sense of their gentleness and intelligence. They're very empathic animals, so that dichotomy between their size and their gentleness makes it a really special experience. So special, in fact, that we did a whole episode about it. It's one of the bucket list episodes. Not many get that designation, and it was out last month. If you missed it, go back and check it out. Here's a little clip of what to expect.
The kind of feeding behavior that we see around here is a lot of lunge feeding, like you've probably seen on Planet Earth or National Geographic, where the whale comes in with its mouth wide open and just takes a huge gulp of whether it be krill or herring or whatever schooling fish it is. And seeing that at the surface is just so loud. It's so big. You don't expect it. There's silence that kind of falls over the crowd, anticipating the whales feeding. And then all of a sudden, the first thing you hear is the big blow. So when the whale surfaces, he or she immediately exhales, and you hear this very loud, almost like trumpeting, and it turns everyone's heads. And then you can hear the mouth closing, the fish like swimming against the surface and slapping against the water, and then you hear the mouth close and they breathe back in, and it's just this whole symphony of nature just right in front of you. It imbibes all of your senses. It's like an orchestra of the environment, and that's something that you feel when you're up here, when you're out on the water. You have the waves, the wind, the birds, the seals, the sea lions, the whales exhaling, those big blows that you hear every few minutes. Your senses are just enveloped in wilderness.
A symphony of nature. I love that description. It's exactly how it feels when nature just wraps you up. That, by the way, was Nick Cuccinio. He's a whale watching guide and expert at Prince of Wales Adventures, brilliantly named. So do go back and check out that episode if you missed it last month. Okay, good start, but lots more to come. Next up, we have fourth generation Victorian award-winning journalist and TV host Tess Van Stratton giving us her take on the ultimate 48 hours in Victoria. She knows the area inside out, as you're about to see. And these Discover episodes are guides to one place that we love, are a new format for us. But what I want to make sure that we do in each and every one is get a local's perspective on the place that they live in, that they love. That's what traveling is all about, isn't it? Trying to dig a little deeper and find those hidden corners, because that's where the best memories are made. So coming up next is Tess Van Stratton and her ultimate 48 hours in Victoria.
I think the number one must see and do thing in Greater Victoria is to go to Butchart Gardens. So they're very famous gardens, world famous. I've been to 60 countries on 6 continents, and everywhere I go, people tell me, oh, the Butchart Gardens, when I mention I'm from Victoria. So even the most obscure places I've been in the world, they've heard of the Butchart Gardens. It was an old quarry that was transformed into these beautiful gardens. There's a Chinese garden. There's different rose gardens, so many amazing roses. And then the sunken garden is what you'll see in all the photos, where you're at the top of the stairs and look down at this incredible garden.
It's so nice to have that kind of oasis in a city as well, isn't it? Like, you know, the places you can kind of go and escape and get that little bit of nature fix. So where are you taking us after that?
I think you have to explore the Inner Harbor. It's absolutely beautiful. There's lots of different restaurants down there. There's places you can hang out and have a drink on a patio, and just to see some of the old architecture that's made Victoria famous. That's beautiful. And then after maybe lunch, the Empress Hotel, they do high tea as well, which Victoria is very famous for. You could then walk to Fisherman's Wharf, which is a nice little stroll along the water for the most part. And then at Fisherman's Wharf, there's so much more wildlife you can see. There's seals bobbing in the water all of the time. You can take a little kayaking trip with a guide. You can go across the coast and across the harbor, and you can actually see, if you're here in springtime, you could see seal pups. There's a little island off of Esquimalt where all these little seal pups are born, and it's just a quick paddle away. And then, of course, the Dallas Road breakwater is also very popular. So from Fisherman's Wharf, you can keep walking or you could bike. And then at the Dallas Road breakwater, you can walk out into the ocean to a little old lighthouse at the end and get beautiful views, especially on a sunny day. It's stunning. We're surrounded by water on 3 sides in Victoria, so you're never far from the water. And what you actually see across from you is Washington State. So it's Port Angeles, Washington, and you see the Olympic Mountains, which are snow-capped all the time. Like, there's a lovely drive starting on Dallas Road that becomes Beach Drive, and then you get to the Oak Bay Beach Hotel. They've got an amazing pool that's right on the edge of the water. There's nothing more special than soaking in that pool and just looking at the view. But there's also some amazing restaurants on the other side of the water as well, on the other side of the Inner Harbor, that you can get some great eats at. We've got a lot of diversity in our restaurants. Or you could have fish and chips down at Fisherman's Wharf, right on the water, on the docks. And there's lots of other restaurants now there as well.
Wow, you've blown it, because it's all downhill from here. Like, we've just had the best first afternoon. Like, what are we going to do now?
It keeps getting better.
You
Yeah, so that's a busy
soon.
first day. There's lots of fun and amazing things to do. But I guess it really depends on what you're looking for, right? There's great hiking trails just minutes from downtown in beautiful parks like Thetis Lake. You can walk around the lake. In summer, it's a popular swimming spot. It has a sandy beach, and it's one of the warmest lakes here, so you can swim there. And then, of course, if you're continuing that drive along the water, along Beach Drive, once you get to Oak Bay, there's Willows Beach, which is one of the sandiest beaches here, and it's absolutely beautiful. But if you're energetic, you could actually walk or bike from downtown to Fisherman's Wharf and then keep going along the water all the way to Oak Bay and Willows Beach.
Man, that just sounds amazing. It feels like a really kind of meditative, chilled place. The way you describe it, being surrounded by the ocean and all that nature all around you, it just sounds like a very calm place. Is that a fair way to describe it?
I think it is, because especially when you're downtown, you're never really far from the water. You can see it from most locations, and then you can get to it. So growing up here, that's what I would always do. If I was having a bad day or not feeling great, I just go down to the beach or go along the water and just sit there a few minutes and the sound of the waves. And it's just such a peaceful thing. And most of our waterfront's also a migratory bird sanctuary. So you can see lots of different birds, and you can see lots of different seals bobbing in the water. There's also river otters as well in the water, and whales, of course. And there are times, if you're lucky enough, you can see whales from shore. Some of our transient killer whales will actually come in, and they're the seal hunting whales. They will come into the inner harbor chasing seals, and you'll see them right by downtown Victoria, right along the coastline. But if you truly want to see the whales, you have to go whale watching. That would probably be my other must thing do, especially if people haven't been to the Pacific Northwest before.
So our last night, we've packed a lot in. Where are we going to go and celebrate for our last night?
Ooh, well, the Empress Hotel has a really nice bar. It's right on the inner harbor. So the Q Bar, named after Queen Victoria. And the Empress Hotel has a long history here. Royalty stayed there. Movie stars have stayed there. And it just recently went under a massive renovation. So it's absolutely beautiful. And it's a nice place to have their famous Empress gin, which actually turns, when you mix it with the tonic, the pea flower, and it makes it turn purple.
You might even get me drinking gin for that. Gin's that one spirit. You know, everyone's got their one spirit. That was just something happened in my earlier life that I'm not allowed to drink gin anymore. But I think a purple gin and tonic would maybe
break that,
convince me
make you come
to
back.
go back. Yeah. But these are wonderful, wonderful tips and experiences. Thank you so much for all of this. Where can people connect with you and find out more about what you do?
Well, I'm on X at Tess Van Stratton and Instagram at Tess Van Stratton. My last name's Dutch, so it's spelt VANSTRAATEN. And I do, before COVID, I actually had a Vancouver Island travel column I used to write. So every month I go out and have a little adventure somewhere, either in Victoria or up island as well, because there's so many amazing places in the Cowichan Valley. And if you come to Vancouver Island, you really should go to Tofino. It's just such a special spot as well.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Tess. You've been absolutely amazing to come on the show. Thank you so much for your time. I can't wait. And I'm going to be knocking on your door and heading down there for some fish and chips and purple gin and tonic when I see you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, Armchair Explorers, we've got one more segment left, and it's a dreamy one, starring the Mermaid of the Pacific. That's what they call Amanda Swiminer around here, and quite right too. If this is a place where the land meets the sea, then Amanda personifies that connection because she harvests natural seaweeds, dries them, and sells them to local restaurants. And if you're making a face right now, don't. Seaweed, believe it or not, is actually very tasty, and it's a sustainable food source that's been harvested on these coasts for thousands of years. Sometimes Amanda collects it in that intertidal zone on the beaches at low tide, but other times, the Mermaid of the Pacific swims hundreds of feet offshore to the kelp forest, glowing white and aquamarine in the pristine deep of the Pacific Ocean.
I honestly feel like I was born with a really deep passion for the ocean. I don't ever remember a time where I wasn't completely enthralled in the mysteries and the depth and the expansiveness and all the creatures that live in the ocean, which is kind of curious because I grew up in Ontario, which is one of the more landlocked places in the world. But my dad is from Nova Scotia, so we would drive out there every summer for his holidays, and I would spend my days sitting on the beach looking for creatures and swimming in the salt water, and I always had that love as far as I can remember. And then one day I had this new wild crafting book, and it had 3 seaweeds in it. I went down to the beach and I found one of them, and it told me how to cut it to leave the reproductive part and so that it would keep growing if you cut it in this certain place in this certain way. And I came up with, I don't know, maybe 20 long pieces of this seaweed, and I pinned up a string in my little one-room cabin, and I hung them up and went back at low tide the next day and kept doing that and got a business license and got licensed to do it, and here we are, I guess 22 years later. There's a lot of indigenous nations that are harvesting it, doing a traditional harvest of that seaweed still today. As far as they've been living here, they found evidence that it was a really prized trade item as well. So it would be traded with nations as far away as like Alberta. They've used it as a food, as a medicine. There's evidence it was used as a treatment for cancer in one of the oldest medical texts known. So it's definitely been a part of human culture, food, all of that for thousands of years. Most of the species I harvest in the intertidal zone, but I'm going to tell you about a typical day harvesting bull kelp because that's one that I get to swim out to the kelp forest. So it grows out in the deeper waters. I have 2 big heavy-duty mesh bags. I have a folding knife that's tied to an elastic that I put around my wrist so that I can hold it when I need it and then drop it when I don't need it. Mask, fins, and snorkel, and then I swim offshore a couple hundred meters. And by the time I start harvesting bull kelp, it's grown big enough that its blades are floating at the surface. So I get out there after, saying hi to some Dungeness crabs, some jellyfish, some cool creatures. It's my favorite place on Earth. It's mystical beyond imagination almost. The first thing is just the color of the kelp forest. It's this impossible to describe sort of aqua with glowing white coming out of it. I think there's a little write-up section in my book. I call it the color of God because it just feels like you're like in this weird spirit sort of energy. So the color's amazing. And then, it's like flying through a forest. Bull kelp can grow in excess of 30 meters high. And then it has, like I said, those blades float at the surface that form this canopy. So you'll be snorkeling outside of the kelp forest, and it's all bright and the sun's coming down. And then you get into the kelp forest and underneath is all dark and spooky, and there's all kinds of different types of fish hiding out there, sometimes octopuses. There's the really cool kelp crabs that have evolved legs to be able to walk up and down the stipe of the bull kelp, which, again, if you're comparing it to a land forest, would sort of look like the trunk of the tree. And you can, be snorkeling out and not see very many creatures, and then you get to the kelp forest and it's like a scene out of a National Geographic special. Like all the life is teeming there, and it's pretty amazing place to be. It's my favorite place. Victoria is really wonderful for the nature and things like that because it's at the very south tip of Vancouver Island, and so a lot of that whole outer tip of the ocean has just been left wild beaches. And so we go down to a really beautiful small little beach in James Bay near Ogden Point at low tide, and there's incredible seaweed diversity there. It's sort of where the Juan de Fuca ends or begins, depending on how you look at it. So it's quite exposed, so it gets a really good diversity of seaweeds. It gets a lot of different types of kelps growing in there. And so we go down there and we look at some of the seaweeds that we see. I talk about which ones are edible, how they're sustainably harvested. And then I also bring usually about 8 different seaweeds that usually we get to see them down at the beach. And then I have small amounts that I've hand harvested and gently dried. So as we're seeing them, participants get to have a taste of the different seaweeds and see what they think. They're like different vintages, like they absorb nutrients directly from the water they're growing in. So they absolutely will have the flavor of the area that they're coming from. And also there's just a huge diversity of edible seaweeds. So if you think of them like vegetables, they all have like quite different flavors, but the one flavor that really binds them is that briny, salty, very strong umami flavor. That's sort of, all seaweeds have that. But beyond that, they have very, very different flavors for sure. And wow, there are some local chefs on the island doing some pretty cool things with seaweeds. So it's pretty exciting to see what they come up with. I surf as well, so if you forgot to eat before you got out on the water, you just have a little bite. All of my seaweed tours and workshops have a foundational focus of sustainability at their core. And I do talk a lot about the role that seaweeds and more broadly algae, seaweeds belong to a group of organisms known as algae. Their formal name would be macroalgae. How critically important they are to the health of the planet in terms of regulating climate, keeping the planet cool, and really feeding the entire ocean ecosystem. And the good news with seaweed is that it is among the fastest growing things on the planet. So it's really fast growing. It can be cut in a way that it will continue to grow, much like pruning your bushes or cutting your grass. So it does have the potential to be a very sustainable food source. We live in a really challenging time in a lot of different ways. And even though a lot of people know and believe what science has said about the state of the environment, people don't really get fired up to change their habits or to help out or to respond because of statistics or facts, no matter how alarming they might be. What I have sort of found along my years of traveling this life so far is that when people feel an emotional connection to something, that's when they feel that inspiration to be able to do something to help out. You go there and then you get it. You feel that the magical energy of the place, getting people out, getting people down at the beach, getting their hands touching the seaweed and looking at it and all the different colors, and there's seaweeds that are iridescent, and just trying to be a bridge between people and seaweed so that this relationship can develop, I think is a really effective way at achieving protection.
I think that's so beautiful. How much do you want to go out and swim in that kelp forest now? It sounds amazing. And the thing I love about Amanda too is she is that personification of that idea of where the land meets the sea. That is literally where she spends her life, in that intertidal zone where vast, powerful ecosystems collide and create something magic in between. Thanks for listening, guys. If you're excited to explore further or maybe book that trip to Victoria and Vancouver Island yourself, you can head over to destinationgreatervictoria.com. The Instagram is @tourismvictoriabc. Lots of great information up there, so do go and check that out. You can also connect directly with today's guests: Alan Bruce from the Peddler Cycling Tours and Rentals, Nick Coutinho at the Prince of Wales, Tess Van Stratton, she's on Instagram at Tess Van Stratton with 2 A's, and finally, Amanda Swiminer, aka Mermaid of the Pacific. So that's about it. If you missed our bucket list episode from last month, whale watching in Victoria with Nick Coutinho, go and check that out. It's pretty cool. And in the meantime, remember to never stop exploring, because the more we look for wonder in the world, the more the wonder of the world becomes a part of who we are. Dare to be truly alive. This episode was produced by Armchair Productions, the audio experts for the travel industry. My name's Aaron Miller. I wrote and presented the show, and Charles Tyree did the audio editing and sound design. Find our other shows at armchair-productions.com.